quick video to introduce the first steps of scripting. So I'm assuming here that we've already done the Mr. Init step. I'm back in this working directory here. Remember what you can see here in the workspace in MATLAB, or in the command line window in MATLAB, is represented here, right? So I've got this loop going that updates me to changes in the file system. So at the moment, the workspace in MATLAB is empty, apart from this variable, ans, which is, just some text that was stored there. I can make sure that's gone. All right. And so we can actually get a view without starting the interactive window at all. And so the way to do that is to use a command called new view. And if these variables are present here, then this should work. Okay, so we're going to capture the output of that function in a variable called v. And now we can work with this variable. So we can query the state by using view get. For example, I can get current scan, which is set to 1. I can get current group, which is set to 1 as well. I can get things like group names. Okay, and so I can stitch some of these commands together by storing things in variables. So for example, if I keep track of the current scan, I can actually get this and store the output from that call in the local variable. Sorry, scan. Do the same for group. Group. And maybe I also want to do this for, say, group names. Okay, so just to show you a little trick of if you are not happy with using numbers for the groups raw and motion comp, but you actually want to use things by name, we can do the following, right? So we can actually get the parameter group names, which will give us a list, an ordered list of group names that are available. So in this case, we only have raw and motion comp. In your analysis, you might have additional ones such as averages or concatenations and so on and so forth, or even ones that have names that you give them yourself. And so if you wanted to figure out what current group 1 actually means, well, it's an index into these group names, right? So if I say group names, which is actually a cell array, and I say the current group is this, I will get the text version of what group we're actually talking about. Okay, so my view variable, so these are all get operations, where we just get information from this object, from this view object, but we haven't actually changed the state. Okay, so if you wanted to change the state in your script, so for example, you wanted to change which group you're currently looking at from 1 to 2, then you'd have to use a set function, view set, and you could say, I want to set the current group to the number 2, which corresponds to the motion comps. Now, you might think this works, but there's a gotcha here, which is that we are actually operating on this view object, but the view set function returns the modified view object, and it just goes nowhere at the moment. Okay, so the pattern you have to use is to not just call this view set function, but you capture what this function returns and overwrite or update the view. Okay, so if we do this now, then actually the view variable v will have this updated current group 2, right? So it's sort of like you only keep one view object around, and in order to modify it, you feed, you use it with the view set function, and the view set function returns the object and you overwrite it. Okay, so it turns out in MATLAB that's not such a terrible idea, because you're not recreating this whole view structure every single time you do this operation, so it's actually quite quick. just updating a field, and MATLAB's clever enough to keep track of that stuff. Okay, so we can do various things here. So if you imagine, for example, you have a choice between two different analyses that you want to load, you can also load in these analyses, which is something I'll show you in a second. Or if you are doing, if you're working through in your script through a series of scans in a group, say 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you want to process each of them in turn, you could imagine writing a short loop that goes through, it sets current scan to the number 1 first, does a processing 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, so I'll stop this. In the next video, I'll show you how to load in various objects. So load in an anatomy, an overlay, and so on into these view objects, which are just existing in our workspace at the moment, and we don't really have a Mr. MR Loadred window attached to it. So they sort of exist in a sort of abstract way at the moment, but you still might want to use load-in analysis that you've performed before.